Well, let's now cross to our live panel of experts now. Joining me is Ajit Kumar, editor of Research at India Today, joining us from New Delhi. Khulekani, Skosana, chairperson of the International Relations at the African Nation Congress Youth League in Johannesburg, and Qinduo, the political analyst, senior fellow at Pangal Institution in Beijing. Thank you all very much for joining us on the programme. Now, first to you, Kumar. Do you think the US is actually in a position to lead a new world order, as President Joe Biden is suggesting?
I don't think this is the time to talk about a new world order. In fact, what is right now required is an attempt to bring about peace, reduce escalations on both sides, talk a language of diplomacy, talk a language of not aggression. Rather than, if you talk about a new world order, it sort of signifies as if you are already victorious at a time when the world is undergoing through a pandemic, a kind of the entire global economy is in a crisis. And as you pointed out yourself, the American President Biden's sort of popularities are at a historic low at 40%. That should not be the time to talk about a new world order that President Biden sort of referred to during one of the meetings yesterday. So I think this is a time for diplomacy, a time for peace, a time to bring about negotiations, not a time to sort of enhance aggression, a time to sort of push NATO into some kind of aggressive posture. That's what I feel personally.
Skosana, over to you. Now, we know not all countries are going to agree to an American-led world order. How do you think Joe Biden expects to go about trying to make this idea work in that case?
Thank you very much. As young people of the African continent and as young people of South Africa, a peace-loving country, we are worried that there seems to be a country in a world where there's 150 minimum countries, which feels that it has been elected to lead us. There is no convention where we met and we agreed that America is going to be the leader of the world and therefore determine the time when there must be or not a new world order. And if they're inviting the world to what they call the new world order, where the participation in that world order depends on your support for their expansionist and dominant mentality. We refuse to be part of that because the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. America and the West have successfully fooled the world, and they are purporting themselves to be a democracy and freedom-loving nation. But their actions historically have declared them not to be such. I mean, you look at something as simple as NATO. NATO was initiated to respond to the Soviet Union. But what is the purpose of NATO when the Soviet Union collapses in 1991? Instead of following the USSR, NATO uses that opportunity to expand. I mean, we stand with the Russian people when they say enough is enough. We saw what happened in Poland. We saw what happened in Georgia. And it is enough. And clearly, we cannot allow ourselves, people, to come with guns here and tell us that they are preaching peace. We've got a situation in our continent, and that's why we share the sentiments of the Russian people. We've got something called AFRICOM here. There's no war. There's no point for AFRICOM to be here, especially if it is not assisting the people of Swaziland, if it is not assisting the people of Western Sahara. So we do not subscribe to this narrative of a new world order. And if they're inviting us to a new world order, we are saying to them, enough is enough with the sanctions. Sanctions must officially be declared as instruments of war, because the United States continuously uses these sanctions to crucify innocent citizens who have nothing to do with whatever expansionist mentality they have. If they want to target President Putin, why are they not targeting President Putin? What did the people of Russia do? And this goes to say that the Western thinking must be called to order, and we're happy that the Russian Federation has decided to stand up to the bully. We do not subscribe to any mentality or idea of a new world order. The only world order that we want is one that speaks of peace. It's one that speaks of silencing the guns. And to us, President Putin has displayed by opening the humanitarian corridor, by coming on the table and wanting to discuss with the Ukrainian government. That is a display that he shares our sentiments of peace. And we are saying that war on war to end war.
Qinduo, what was quite curious about President Biden's speech was how he mentioned that 60 million people died to pave the way for the previous world order. Now, what sort of message do you think he's sending when mentioning such horrific numbers in context of a new world order?
This indeed is inappropriate. His tone almost sounds like celebratory. It's like victorious, as my colleague has pointed out earlier. It's like he's happy to see now there's a moment the U.S. could seize upon and to regain the leadership of the world, of the new world order, so-called. Well, people in Russia and Ukraine obviously suffers, or some people even died, and there's a humanitarian crisis. And the world is in chaos in the wake of the more or less still ongoing pandemic crisis. So this is indeed, I would say, it's a bit weird to say there's a new global order and the U.S. is poised to lead. Of course, as you mentioned, the number of people died. That's a bit scary. People would ask, is the U.S. prepared to do something or to involve deeper in the war in Ukraine? That could mean more people could be killed. So this is problematic, to say the least. And also, I'm not sure how he get this idea. He almost can't wait to lead. While the war is ongoing, they say we are ready to lead this new global order. People would ask, internally, Biden can't unite his own country. We know how divided America is. And he's in danger of, his party, Democratic Party, is in danger of losing the majority in the Congress in the upcoming midterm election in November, given this inflationary pressure and also this his handling of the pandemic. People almost already expressed their displeasure with his management of those issues. And externally, if you take a look at the U.S. relationship with other countries, yes, the U.S. is happy to see there's unity because of the Ukraine crisis between European countries and the U.S. Basically, European countries are getting closer to the U.S. instead of seeking relative autonomy because of the new challenge. But then, if you look at globally, basically the U.S. and the European countries and Japan probably they formed the West. The West is alone, and the global South. If you take a look at the big developing countries like India, China, South Africa, Brazil, etc., Indonesia, Argentina. We live in the developing world. When we see the crisis here in Ukraine, when we see the sanctions imposed by the West, when they made the decisions, they never took into consideration the interests of the developing world. Like those countries, when they imposed no sanctions on Russia, how can they continue their trade with Russia when Russia was cut off from SWIFT, etc.? So they pressure China, they pressure India to cut ties with Russia. They have their interests, only their interests into consideration, not the interests of the rest of the world. Remember, de Villepin, the former prime minister of France, said recently about the Ukraine crisis is that in this non-Western world, there's a popular feeling of injustice and resentment toward this West. This, I would say, this West which is standing alone.
Kumar, back to you. Joe Biden certainly seems to think the Western world is now united, perhaps even more than ever before. Do you think that's really the case, though?
I don't really think so. I mean, take, for example, Biden's other statements that he made, right at the point when he's talking about the New World Order. Look at his language. Biden, 2 years ago, when he became the American president, was supposed to be the decent liberal who uses a gentleman's language. Now he calls the Russian president a war criminal. I quote, when he talks about India, he says India is shaky in isolating Russia. Now, that's not the language consistent with a person who is trying to unite the world. I mean, India is a member of the Quad, right? India, Australia, Japan, and America. All four are members of the Quad in terms of Indo-Pacific issues. Now, he suddenly points out, just because India's national interest doesn't coincide with that of the US, Biden's language changes, calls India a shaky in isolating Russia. He doesn't realize that he was equally shaky, in fact, worse than shaky, when he withdrew from Afghanistan. When he withdrew from Afghanistan after 20 long years, Afghanistan was reduced to a rubble, and it was totally American failure. And in that, countries like India were involved in trying to bring about peace, but totally left isolated. So what I'm saying is that his entire rhetoric of trying to bring in the free world, I mean, India is the world's largest democracy, and you call that shaky in isolating Russia, reflects the language in the past of an American who said, if you're not with us, you are against us. That is not the language of, a great visionary who's trying to unite the free world, who's trying to unite Europe. Even within Europe, several of the countries in Europe, for example, are dependent on Russian oil, Russian gas. They are not, it is very difficult for them to agree to the kind of sanctions that the Americans want, or let's say a few Western European countries want. Several, even Germany, for example, Finland, several of these smaller countries, Macedonia, Latvia, many of them are very uncomfortable with this idea of massive muscular sanctions against Russia. The need of the hour is to reduce temperatures, to bring about peace, to let dialogue and diplomacy replace what's going on right now, to try and be the bridge between, let's say, Ukraine and Russia. But that's not the language. It's like a threat. If you don't listen to me, I will impose sanctions. I'll destroy you. You are like a war criminal. I mean, that is not the word. That is not the language of a leader of the free world who should be uniting the free world. And I don't think he has been even able to bring all the European Union countries together, let alone the rest of the world. And today, the entire world doesn't center around, Europe and America. I mean, the big powers, as my sort of colleague from China pointed out, the big countries, emerging countries in the world are India, China, Brazil, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, many of the G20 countries. And not only that, all the members of the United Nations. So this old arrogance of the permanent members of the Security Council that we will run the world is something that Mr. Biden, who is otherwise supposed to be a thoroughbred gentleman, he should not use that language. The language should certainly be one of, as I said, diplomacy, peace, reducing all kinds of tensions right now, healing the world which is facing a pandemic, which is several countries in Europe are about to enter a recession, Britain being one, an important NATO member. So right now the language should be one of trying to heal the world, not send some kind of signal which is a threat and then further divide the world, because that will not lead to any kind of, a positive future.
Yeah. Skosana, coming back to you, what Kumar was just saying certainly brings us back to the discussion of a multipolar world, something countries like Russia, China and India have been proposing for many years now. Would you consider Joe Biden's proposal of a new world order to be a challenge to the idea of a multipolar world?
I mean, it definitely is a challenge. Look, I will keep on speaking about Libya because, by the way, there's no single African state that is a member of NATO. And there's no single African member state that bombarded Libya. They killed Muammar Gaddafi. We will not forget that. An African leader duly elected by his people. And it's so sad that NATO did not even give the African Union a chance over its area of jurisdiction. And we don't want a unipolar world where one country controls the entire international financial system. We encourage, as African people, we encourage progressive superpowers like China to use this opportunity to ensure that alternative platforms are created. We need to move to a state of a world order where these sanctions of the US are ineffective. And it's important that we start recognizing and looking at these sanctions as instruments of war. I want to say to Russian citizens that they need not see sanctions as soft power and as not military power. Sanctions are imposed against a nation, and it is an attempt to separate the Russian Federation from the world. We refuse to be part of that, and we are saying that we've experienced what this new world order they refer to. That new world order delinquents the African Union, and it puts the NATO powers over Africa, and we are refusing to be part of that. And it's not just limited to that. You know, these people have declared war against talent. They've declared war against talent in the world. If you are talented and you are not pro-American, it is a problem. And we are saying that it cannot be correct that Bill Gates is called an innovator, yet a visionary like Alisha Usmanov and Roman Abramovich are under heavy draconian sanctions. And we are saying that clearly these people, even as they lie to us and tell us about a free world, they declare war against talent which has no political bias, talent which has no view on international matters. How do you ban cats from competing in competitions? This is arrogance, and it's a display that they don't have any intention to have conversation, progressive conversation. And you know, the world is refusing to acknowledge the patience of the Russian people. Since 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, since 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the US and NATO have declared war against the citizens of Russia. And we don't want Russia to declare war against the world. However, we are saying that war on war to end war. And we cannot fight guns with brooms and sticks. And we applaud President Putin. He must continue to stand firm. He must continue to fight the bullies. Whereas many of our leaders, they spend time narrating and idolizing solutions. We are happy that there is a world leader who finally stood up and challenged what is called a system. And by the way, this Joe Biden will be dead. He speaks about the new world order. What is the point of speaking about the new world order where you will not be allowed? We young people of this world, progressive young people who are born out of struggles of apartheid, who are born out of struggles of colonialism, we will declare where this world goes. And we are saying this world must go in the direction of peace. And that peace will not be facilitated by the Americans.
OK, thank you very much. We're running very short on time. I have just time for one quick question that I'd like to pose to all of you. If you could keep your answers brief, I'd really appreciate it. I'd like to ask all of you, speaking of the Western idea to exclude Russia from the G20, which countries do you expect to definitely support Russia on this? Let's go to Kumar first, please, briefly.
No, I don't think. I think it's a really silly idea itself. I mean, Russia is a very powerful country. Russia has highest amount of oil and gas, and Russia is almost #1 in space technology. Russia has been one of the biggest suppliers of defense equipment to a country like India. How can you remove from G20? This is an arbitrary, completely arbitrary sort of remark, and it should not take place. I think in order to talk to someone, you have to respect that country. Russia should be part of G20. Only then can you bring about a solution. You cannot bring about a solution by throwing it out of the G20 or isolating it. It's the wrong strategy, according to me.
Mr. Xu, your thoughts?
Well, I think the G20 is an important place to discuss global economy. It's a mechanism to resolve economic issues, challenges, and the theme for this year's G20 meetings is really about the economic recovery after this pandemic. It is not about issues related to the Ukraine crisis or politics. So the Western pressure seems to be like more pressure on Russia. But it's very hard, it makes it very hard for the host country, Indonesia, because Indonesia, China, South Africa, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, all these countries, India, they would say no, to exclude Russia. Otherwise, the G20 would be non-existent. Russia is a superpower in terms of energy supply. If you want to solve this economic problem, we need the energy supply for developing countries like India, China. I believe many other countries. They need wheat, they need minerals, they need energies from Russia. We have to keep this trade on.
And finally, to Mr. Skosana.
Thank you. And thank you for your viewers and South African viewers, to be particular in the ANC. As I close, we want to make this message clear. I'm a young person, I'm a student of history. I read books and I've studied what happened. And we don't want history to repeat itself. And we're saying that all countries which find themselves as former colonies of British rule, all countries which find themselves as former colonies of American rule, Portuguese, Spanish, you name it, they need to remember history. And they need to know who helped them when everyone declared them terrorists. When everyone declared us enemies of freedom, we know who stood with us. It is our time now to stand correctly with those who supported and defended us when we were reduced to animals. When we were called monkeys, there are those who saw us as human beings, and it is the citizens of the Russian Federation. Let us not be opportunistic and betray them at the pinnacle and significant moment in history. We are saying to all BRICS member countries, we are watching as young people of the world, and we are refusing 3.5 billion citizens in 5 countries of BRICS. Let us unite. Let us ensure that if they remove Russia from a SWIFT system, China must come through as a technological giant and uplift out of that. We're refusing. They can sanction all of us. If they are going to sanction us for the same ideas that Mandela kept, if they are going to sanction us from the ideas of Oliver Tambo, then they must continue. But we're saying that we, as African people, we will stand on the correct side of history, and we are refusing to be convinced by television. The revolution will not be televised. It will not be retweeted. We read and we study history, and it stands with the people of Russia. Thank you.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you very much to all 3 of our guests for joining us and sharing your insights on the programme with us. We've been speaking to Ajit Kumar, editor of the research at India Today, Khulekani Skosana, chairperson of international relations at the African National Congress Youth League, and Mr. Qinduo, political analyst, senior fellow at Pangal Institution. Thank you very much.